the issue for me then is to say, what are some of the variables? Here is the big one for me, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
design principle that I first wrote about 17 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really a design principle, it's a play principle, and then how it's implemented in design is another
Mm-hmm.
question. But the play principle has to do with the fact that as you play, how do we know certain things have happened, that they are available to reincorporate back into play as we go? And here's a good example. How do we know the
Mm-hmm.
goblin's dead? Okay. How do we
Mm-hmm.
know the goblin's dead? And you can say, well, I rolled this much damage and he has that many hit points and this number is bigger than that number, so he's dead, right? No,
Yeah.
systems don't have authority. People have authority.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the table and somebody will say to the others, he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
That's the result. And you will find that no matter what the instrumentation, that there is always a person, and they have specific things about what they can say is the case, depending on
Mm-hmm.
what else has been consulted. And I'll give you an example of some of the confusions that can occur
Mm-hmm.
when you don't know. If we are all in the okay, it's a vampire game. We are in
Mm-hmm.
a nightclub, and of course, everybody is. It's the nightclub scene, right? We're in the nightclub,
Mm-hmm.
and I say that the it has been said somebody has the ability, not me, but someone else has the ability to say the bartenders are really busy, just to give some
Mm-hmm.
atmosphere, right? Okay, so fantastic. That is established. That person is the person who gets to say that. So we know this is
Mm-hmm.
the case. And I say, I go up and talk to the bartender. I'm going to the bartender. I want to say something. Now,
Mm-hmm.
let's look at two games. We're going to split into two dimensions. In this
Okay.
dimension, the person who plays the bartender
Mm-hmm.
will say, hey, buddy, what do you have? And he's got like making one drink with one hand and one drink with another, right? What will
Mm-hmm.
you have? And you say, actually, I want to talk about Shady Slim. Have you seen him? Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
you're having the interaction. In this other dimension,
Mm-hmm.
that same person says, this girl comes up to you and wants to and is getting seductive with you. She's in your face.
Mm-hmm.
She's kind of aggressive. And this is kind of interesting. In the first dimension, if the
Mm-hmm.
game master did that, the player would say, excuse me, I said I was talking to the bartender. I said
Mm-hmm.
what my character does. I play my character. By saying that, I have walked him over and opened my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Done. What do you mean? No, we're past that walking to the bar part. I said that.
Mm-hmm.
In the second dimension, the player, and in the first dimension, even if, the game master didn't even get in the way, but if they accidentally did, they would say, oh, yeah, you're right. Sorry, you're at the bar. You did say that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the second dimension, you can see what's coming. You put the girl in the guy's face, and the player says, excuse me, but I am talking to the bartender. I said that.
Mm-hmm.
And the game master says, I do this saying around here. She intercepts you first.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying either of those is bad. What's bad is not knowing which one you're playing,
Yeah.
right? So
Yes.
and the same thing goes for opening and closing scenes. Who if you say next morning you're all at breakfast,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that these statements are completely not open to negotiation. A
Mm-hmm.
number of people might say, oh wait, I wanted to do this first or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
if you watch that table, you will discover whether one person gets to decide whether they did that first.
Mm-hmm.
There are authorities over these, and a table only works when we know who that person is for what,
Yes.
right?
And I'm not, I think I'm getting this right. I can even say that from my play experience, I see these two dimensions appear in what people are saying at the table, some players adjusted to one of those dimensions will only state their intent. I want to
Right.
go to the bartender
I
and
have to
talk to
get
him.
permission. I have to be
Yes,
confirmed. Right. Exactly.
yes. And in the other and then the other group of people will describe them walking and starting a conversation with the bartender, which means they already have
Right.
this authority to say it. And I,
Exactly.
as the GM master, as the game master or other player, accepted that they are now
Absolutely.
there.
Exactly. And so, what my argument and part of my
Mhm,
terminology for the systems of play is to identify several different kinds of authorities to point out several things that the way that the authorities are distributed around the table for who and about what is often very, very different in two games that superficially you think are the same game. In
mhm,
fact, two different tables for the same text will be doing this differently. And so that's the first thing, is to understand this distribution of authorities. One of the biggest problems in role playing is that the term game master, especially the game master, is not just a distribution of authorities, but is for some reason assumed to be able to override the authorities we thought we were using.
mhm.
Nobody likes it. Nobody likes that. Nobody, no, even game masters who are used to do it through some sense of control or creative directorship. If you
Mhm.
ask them 500 sessions into, 50 sessions into their game, they're exhausted. How many people
Yeah.
have told me I control my table? I make sure the story is good. You have to have somebody in control. It's chaos without it. I have to be able to override everything all the time. And then I
Mhm.
say, how much fun are you having? And they say, oh my god, I hate it. I'm exhausted. The players are
Yeah.
terrible. They don't do this. They don't do their jobs. And I'm like, well, you took their jobs away from them. What do you expect? So the point is that we cannot take what is absolutely, under any sensible person, any child's understanding of the
Mhm.
situation, is a dysfunctional creative set of interactions. You
Mhm.
can't take that dysfunctionality and say it's a thing. It's not a thing, it's a breakdown. Don't show me a broken car and tell me it's a kind of car, right?
Yeah.
So that's one. So we need to examine our terminology and say, wait a minute, when we say trad game, traditional GM, game mastering, the game master, are you talking about something that you actually do to play, or are you talking about a bunch of strange compensating mechanisms for limping along, right? I have
Mhm.
several examples for this, which are striking. Um,
Mhm.
the and because there a lot of role playing history has been imitative in terms of what's published, so
Mhm.
huge holes are often completely missing, and they remain missing through the years. One
Mhm.
of my favorites I call the axe in the air. um, there's some kind of social interaction going on, and one of the players gets irritated and says, I throw my axe at him.
Mhm.
Well, do you start by rolling initiative and taking all the actions in order? Or is the axe in the air already when you begin the combat mechanics?
Mhm.
And anybody can tell me how they do it at their table. I completely accept there's a way they do it at their table. I defy
Yeah.
you to find any mention of that in any form of D&D or D&D adjacent game. It's not there.
Yeah.
So the point I'm trying to get at is that when we look at Apocalypse World as a game, I think its
Mhm.
text is extraordinarily clear about its authorities. But I think that that's what gets lost in a lot of the PbtA games. So that, for example, uh, let's take a situation like in the Zombie World or Monster Hearts, where
Mhm.
somebody rolls a 7 through 9,
Mhm.
and they're in a fight situation, and one of the options says take a wound.
Mhm.
Then another option says, you do a wound, but someone is watching from the shadows.
Mhm.
Well, really, what are the constraints on this? All of a sudden, the player has been, or somebody, is it the player or the game master, has been handed backstory authority, right? The business about I walk across the bar, that's
Mm-hmm.
situational authority. You're talking about the situation in the moment and what
Mm-hmm.
happens. But we're talking now about backstory, what was going on,
Mm-hmm.
which in much role playing is treated as incomplete information. One person knows it, other people don't yet. But
Mm-hmm.
also, you have games where it is improvised into place quite a bit. So, this is a situation where something gets improvised into place. The question is, first of
Mm-hmm.
all, who says who is watching from the shadows? Second, what are the consequences of rolling a 7 and through a 9 instead of a 10 or higher in terms of the actual fight? And I
Mm-hmm.
have noticed that a lot of the PbtA games get very excited about their weird options in the middle and completely forget the conflicts that they were in. So
Yes.
rolling, if the game master is supposed to make this stuff up, which is often assumed, you're forcing the game master to jump through a hoop, right? You hold up a hoop and say, jump. Someone's watching. Tell me who. Jump. And they have to
Mm-hmm.
do it over and over and over. And the actual situations of the play become more and more and more muddled and confused. Did you or did you not win that fight? Were you or were you not? I've played in games of Monster Hearts where we did not even know until I objected at the table very strongly. We did not
Mm-hmm.
even know where the characters were. We did not even know where they were relative to one another or how many
Mm-hmm.
people were around or anything. They were just busy rolling and like improvising crap into what was going on
Mm-hmm.
in a way that I don't consider play at all. We didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
So, another way to look at these authorities, which I think is very relevant here, is this notion of constraint. That
Mm-hmm.
if we want to define a rule, and I hesitate
Mm-hmm.
to define the word rule because everybody is going to object to me, but I would define a rule as what are the constraints on the person who is understood to be an authority on this right now? What are their
Mm-hmm.
constraints? When I say the goblin's dead, it's because I have accepted to use the constraints of these dice and these numbers. Those are going to constrain what I get to say. They may constrain
Mm-hmm.
them very tightly. They may constrain me a little, right? But in a game like the pool, you have a single roll for an entire conflict. You make the roll. We know
Mm-hmm.
whether what the player character was up to fails or succeeds.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another mechanic for who gets to narrate. So whoever narrates, they have to take that rolled outcome as constraint. We know what has succeeded.
Mm-hmm.
Now we get to talk about it, or this guy gets to talk about it. And so,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm trying to say is that rules are how we constrain the way we are going to use our authorities at the table as we go along. There are procedures for if is there a procedure for the situation? A wandering monster roll. Oh, I believe that's what we used to call them. Now we call them random encounters. But the but if you roll this roll every designated time during play to see if a bugbear comes to get you,
Mm-hmm.
that is a constraint on your situational authority. And you have accepted this constraint. You say, I love this constraint.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what rules are. And I also am distinguishing rules meaning what we actually do here as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
something that may or may not be in this rule book, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because every table is going to they're going to, I can't make people play my rule book. They are going to get naked and they are going to take my rule book and run off in the woods with it. There's nothing I can do,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
the does this make sense? Now, if we look at the PbtA games, I think you can
Yeah.
actually see when the author has forgotten all about this authority thing and is almost seduced by this roll dice and make stuff up, right? Kind of excitement. And it becomes very tricky, especially when I say something terrible to them, which is it, it really, there's no intrinsic difference between somebody making it up before play and having it in their notes
Mm-hmm.
and somebody making it up during play. You need to know which one you are doing, and it's a good
Mm-hmm.
choice given either one is a better choice given the other rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing intrinsically better or more fun about one or the other. Imaginatively speaking, they are equivalent. If I have it in my
Yeah.
notes before play and I have the authority to say it when, play reveals it, that's no difference as an imagined item than, oh, I rolled a 10. 10 means I get to, add an
Mm-hmm.
NPC, right?
Mm-hmm.
There isn't a functional difference between the two. There's an
Yeah.
experiential and creative difference based on the other rules in play. That's all.